Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on August 9th, 2022, and this is another supplemental special interview episode, this time with Ben Robinson, formerly of Eaglemoss, now of, I guess we're waiting to find out what his next role is. Ben was kind enough to come on the show to talk to me and Ken Riley from TrekCore about what's been going on with the Eaglemoss bankruptcy situation. We've not yet covered this on WeeklyTrek just because there's not been enough sort of news to talk about it, so I'm really pleased to bring you this full interview episode in which we talk to Ben about everything that's happened with Eaglemoss. As many of you will know by now, it has effectively gone out of business, and there are lots of questions about future of Star Trek ship models, future of the Enterprise D Partwork subscription that many collectors were subscribers to, and so we get into all of the details about what's going on with the Star Trek Starships collection, what's going on with the Enterprise D builder, what folks should expect, and what models were in production that maybe have not yet seen the light of day. So lots and lots of great stuff from Ben. Really want to say thank you for his participating in the interview with us. A full transcript of the interview will go up on TrekCore, but we wanted to get the full interview out to folks as quickly as possible because we know that Eaglemoss has said nothing about their situation, and Ben's really the first person to speak up about it. So without further ado, me and Ken talk to Ben Robinson.
So, are we all ready?
Oh, are you doing an interview as well, Shaban?
I mean, I wonder if we could just start with, like, what has happened, right? I mean, from the fan perspective, from the Eaglemoss customer perspective, we went into the end of last year feeling like there was an embarrassment of riches, right? The number of announcements of new models, of new franchises. You started up the Stargate line, the Expanse line was getting off the ground, the Star Trek line had started to reach into kind of new, like, models that had never even been conceived of as anywhere within the dreams of avarice being possible for Star Trek were coming and happened in, you know, over a period of time. But now here we are today, and Eaglemoss is basically, it sounds like, no more. So I wonder if you could just talk us through a little bit, like, how do we go from fall of last year to where we are today?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not privy to everything that's happened. Essentially, the owners of Eaglemoss pursued a strategy of very aggressive expansion, aggressive growth, with the intention of making the company as attractive to a potential buyer as possible. And the way it feels to me is that they over-egged it. I'm not completely privy to everything. I haven't seen all the numbers and all that, but the general impression that I get from the inside is they tried to grow too fast and that it's kind of toppled over.
Yeah.
And that's not just related to the Star Trek stuff or the science fiction ship stuff. It's the whole business that they were very keen to make it grow very aggressively. And, a few things didn't go their way and they were a little bit ambitious. And this is where we've ended up, unfortunately.
Yeah. And within the context of Star Trek, I mean, as we were just talking about, there was so much happening that was diving so deep into the sort of recesses of stuff that like hardcore fans like, you and I were super excited about. And it was your sense that that was like, as we think about the company and its issues as a whole, was Star Trek a bright light within that? Was it also kind of running up against its challenges? I mean, you guys have been doing this now for 10 year. I mean, it feels like there's only so far you could go and maintain a customer base. Were you sensing that level of pressure in the Star Trek line?
No. I mean, I don't think if people are thinking, oh, they got too obscure with the Star Trek stuff or they got too far and that's why the company's gone bust, that's not why.
Yeah.
The reasons why are more complicated, and as I say, I'm not privy to everything, but it is not because no one was buying the Star Trek ships anymore or anything like that. That is not the case.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about Eaglemoss is that a lot of the bits of the business were still functional and are still attractive to somebody else. I think, we're still in a position of trying to see who that somebody else might be. There's a lot of legal mess to be tidied up. from the kind of end of Eaglemoss. CBS aren't, for example, they can't talk about things because they still have a contract with Eaglemoss. Eaglemoss still exists, even though it's on, it's like on a life support machine, with no hope of recovery, I'm afraid. But there are limits to what people can do until all of that is resolved. But there are still lots of reasons to be optimistic about each of the individual projects.
And I mean, so like obviously, there was the Star Trek Universe subscription, and the Lower Decks collection was getting off the ground, and you're still doing the sort of bonus issues of the sort of original Starship Collections line. But obviously, I think the subscribers and collectors who are feeling the most pain out of this situation are probably those of the Build the Enterprise D part work subscription, which was, I think, about 2/3 completed for some of the, I think that the furthest person probably has about a 2/3 completed model, and now a bankrupt company that doesn't seem like it's in a position to send them anything else. I've seen in the Facebook groups, people, already moving towards selling off what they've got, feeling like all hope is lost. I wonder, what's your perspective for those collectors about how they should be feeling at this moment in time?
They should have hope, is my message to them. I mean, it's clear that Eaglemoss won't be able to continue, but that those projects are still viable and still profitable. And I know that there are some other companies that are looking into taking it on. It's not something that can just be done with a wave of a wand. There's a lot of stuff to sort out in order to do that, but it's still profitable. There are still good reasons for somebody else to want to do it. And I have reason to believe that somebody else will want to do it. That's not to promise anything. Obviously, I can't promise anything. But for right now, my message would be hold tight. Any disputes that you have with Eaglemoss, absolutely pursue, because that's a separate thing to somebody else taking it over.
Right.
But if you think I've got all these bits, I might as well just throw them away, don't do that. Hold on. Give us a few months and we'll see if we can't get somebody else to step into the breach. And I think there are good reasons to think they will.
And Ben, does that optimism apply to the Ghostbusters build-up kit as well? Because I know it's the other popular one.
Yeah, all the build-ups. So the ones that were particularly under my remit, the kind of sci-fi fantasy ones. So the DeLorean, there's still a lot of people building the DeLorean at different stages. The Ecto 1, the Enterprise D, Eleanor. There's a Mustang as well. There are reasons to be optimistic about all of those. Again, I just can't make any promises, but I can tell you that there are people who are interested. Whether that can be sorted out, materialize into something is still a bit of a problem, but hold tight and give people a chance to try and sort something out.
And I just want to kind of thread out a little bit of something that you said, and we'll preface this by acknowledging, obviously, you are not the money guy for Eaglemoss, and you don't control who gets repaid for anything, right? That's not your job, and it never has been.
Sadly not. Well, I say sadly not. I'm not sad about it.
Yeah, right.
But,
yeah. Whoever has that job right now is not in an enviable position. But for those fans who do have pre-orders, they prepaid for a lot of the Enterprise D, with those annual payments that they've not realized kind of the full value of. Do you have any advice for them? I mean, you said continue your disputes. Is there anything more you want to kind of sort of?
I can't really say any more than that. I mean, what I can tell you is that Eaglemoss Limited, the UK company, has gone into administration, which is a form of bankruptcy here. All of the staff have been let go. I do not expect that company to become functional again. Eaglemoss Inc., which is the US arm, is in a slightly different state, but I'm not privy to exactly where it is. I think I would strongly advise anybody who has a dispute to pursue it. And everybody else, I mean, most people are in a situation where they were paying monthly and they only got charged when the thing shipped. So that is the vast majority of people. Yeah. And those people obviously are sat there with, as you say, half or 2/3 of a ship, thinking, well, I'm never going to be able to finish this. My message to them is, I think you may well be able to finish it. I can't make any promises, but don't assume the worst. I would advise patience at the moment, and we'll see where we are in a few months' time.
We've talked models, and I have a few more model questions, but I'm also curious about publishing, right? Hero Collector had obviously had a really extensive publishing line. You'd written a number of those books yourself, the Shipyards books, the Celebration books. I know there were more Celebration books in the process of being written. I think you'd announced the Next Generation one. I heard there was one more that was also in the process of being written. I'm curious, for those publishing projects, is there any sense of a future for those?
Well, again, they're in the same situation where there are reasons to think that someone would want to publish them.
Yeah.
There are legal commitments at the moment, or we can't just shop them around to another publisher just yet. We have to wait for some things to go through with Eaglemoss. But they sold in respectable numbers. They were, they show profit. They would be good things to do. So, I'm again waiting to be in a position where we can go and talk to some other publishers and see if they'd be interested in taking them on. And again, you would think, given the sales figures and what we know, that they would be appealing to somebody.
And in terms of sort of looking across the, let's say the licenses that you yourself were involved in working on, recognizing, of course, that path forward, very unclear, lots you can't talk about. Is your sense that this is probably it's going to be on a franchise by franchise basis as to whether some of this stuff comes back and in what form it does? Or are we going to see obviously it's not going to be Eaglemoss, but are we going to see a company come in and they're going to start putting out Star Trek ships and Expanse ships and Stargate ships as if it were an Eaglemoss 2.0?
I don't know is the honest answer to that. I think both things are quite possible. I think it's possible that there will be one company that comes in and says, yes, the whole program is of interest to me. But it's equally possible that they may not be able to reach an arrangement with the licensor for a particular brand, but they can with some of the others or whatever. I'm relatively optimistic again that there will be a continued life for most of the things that we had started. I think if you are talking about I guess a back issue, a backlist Star Trek ship, the chances of there doing new production of anything except the most famous ships is quite small. But there is stock that is currently tied up in legal disputes. And when that stock's being released, you may well be able to pick up extra bits and pieces for your collection. So if you're sitting there saying, I really, really missed out on Jem'Hadar Fighter or something like that, it's quite possible that some of those will appear somewhere. What's less likely is that someone would reproduce those models.
Right.
If you're talking about, on any of the Enterprises or Voyager or anything like that, I think the chances are that there will be someone who wants to carry on making those, and there will be new production of those. But the more obscure something is, the less likely it is to be made again. So, I guess there's going to be a few months of sorting stuff out. But before the end of the year, I imagine a lot of that rest of that stock will get released. That includes some stuff that was made but not yet released. So things people have heard about but not seen. And at that point, it will be available. Whether, and we may or may not know by then whether anybody's going to pick up the whole program and continue to make them.
I'm curious, the extent to which you even can talk about this, but you just sort of referenced it. So I'm gonna you open the door slightly, so I'm gonna try and bust right through it.
I'll tell you what I
can. In terms of things that were announced but not yet released, or things that had not been announced but had potentially been manufactured, from a Star Trek perspective, are we looking at just the Vancouver, the Caretaker Station? I'm trying to think, the Stargazer XL, or is there, right, those were three things that had been solicited for pre-orders but had not yet been shipped. Is there a lot of other stuff that is sitting in a warehouse that we don't know about? A little bit. I'm curious what your senses of that.
I mean, how do you quantify a lot?
Yeah.
There are various different stages that things are at. So the most important thing is there's a massive amount of investment that comes into making the tooling.
Yeah.
And once the tooling has been made, it is quite cost effective to make to make the units.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anything where the tooling has been made, and what that would mean is anything where you've seen a photograph of what looks like a finished model,
Yeah.
the chances are that that will either be stuck in the system somewhere and will eventually be released, or it actually makes a lot of sense financially to go ahead and do the last bit. So that includes quite a lot of the 32nd century Starfleet ships.
Yep.
From Discovery. I can tell you that what it doesn't include, and in some ways that's easier. So we hadn't started work on the Protostar or on the Stargazer. But I would like to think that somebody can be found who would want to make those.
And for that, that's the Picard Stargazer, the new one, right?
Yeah. So we had, coincidentally, I didn't even know this when we decided to do it until Dave Blass was going, oh, that's good that you're doing that. So we had done an XL version of the original TNG version of the Stargazer. There is obviously the new Stargazer from Picard season 2, and that's the one that we hadn't started on, but would have been kind of next on the list alongside the Protostar.
Yeah. Let me just ask one more question.
Yeah, please.
Just speaking briefly about Lower Decks, because that line kind of just started. There were a few. There was the Cerritos and the Titan that made it out. There was the Vancouver that was announced, and I believe it was a Lower Deck shuttle that was teased. Did you get, if you can talk about it, get any further beyond those 4 items?
We not in terms of actual production. I mean, those 4 were all at the production or pre-production stage, so I have hopes for that. And Lower Decks in particular sold very well. Got a very enthusiastic response, perhaps not surprisingly.
Yeah.
We had got some other. We were about to start work on a naked Cerritos. So with the paneling off, which I'm hoping to be able to make. I hope I can find somebody who wants to make that, not least because Mike McMahon's so kind of helpful. Package ship's far too difficult. We're never going to do the package ship. So yeah, the hope is that we could find someone, and I mean, this is just an unknown. I mean, as I say, the business didn't fail because we were losing money on individual Star Trek ships. There are 1 or 2 that we did lose money on that were a bit marginal. And that's things like the background Romulan ships from the first season of Picard, where, I don't think that had the traction with people that it needed. We were waiting to see whether the sales recovered with the 32nd century ships.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's difficult because you're getting to a point when, we know the Voyager J sold really well, and people love that ship. I think the Nog just came out, and I don't really know what happened with the sales figures on that one.
Yeah.
Things were starting to get a bit messy by that point. But if those sold in respectable numbers, then you'd kind of go, okay, we still have this business making Starfleet ships. We just have to treat some of the alien ships with a bit more caution. But that, that's to be expected when you've made 400 individual ships.
Yeah.
Lower Decks particularly got off to a very strong start. Stargate had started well. The Expanse had started well. I mean, the Rossi and the Razorback, I think, are fantastic models. Some of the best things we ever did, actually. So I'm optimistic that there's some future for those lines. But we have to find someone who wants to step into the breach and wants to make them. And it's always possible that someone will come and get those licenses and I won't be involved. I mean, it could happen. Yeah.
Sure sounds like you'd like to be involved, though, should it continue somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not done. I mean, I may be done, but not through any choice of my own. But yeah, I'm keen to be involved and to make this happen. And one of the things I've got to work out is what I can do to persuade people. To persuade people with money who don't necessarily know about our passions. So I probably need to start some kind of mailing list or petition or something, in order to get people interested. And in the meantime, the more people follow me on Twitter, and then I'll be able to tell them what's going on. But it'll also allow me to say to people, look, I've got all these people who are interested in buying this if you make it.
Yeah.
So those are all the kind of practical things I'm kind of thinking I can do. I haven't really worked that out yet, but this is one of those examples where if people put their hands up and say, yeah, actually, I would really like more, then that will help to make it happen. Fully appreciate if people are like, no, actually, my house is full. I can't get any more ships in. I'm quite glad you've stopped. But that it's, well, you understand what I'm saying. It's got to be able to demonstrate it to people. But I hope that we can, and I hope that we can find someone who's interested in taking it over. I know that the licensors, or certainly CBS, would be very happy to see the line continue.
And in terms of, sort of wish casting, speculation, new company comes in, takes over the Star Trek line. They say, Ben, we were interested in, you're the grandfather of Star Trek ships. We're keeping you around, right? This is your baby. We want you to run this. But enterprises, right? Those seem to be the things that sell. Let's go back to the basics and, throw out the caretaker arrays of the Tiger cores and some of the like deeper reaches that the line had been getting to. I mean, is your sense that in that world of, like, obviously we're totally speculating because no idea who that person is, no idea what their sense of it is, like, do you think there is a future for sort of some of the like reach stuff that we were getting to, or is your sense that there's probably going to need to be a reset where we do end up focusing on, and that will probably include things like the Protostar and Strange New Worlds Enterprise and things like that, but that maybe like any new licensee comes into the space, what's the first thing they do? It's a TOS Enterprise, right? That like we have a little bit of that in our future too. What's your sense of that?
I think it's somewhere in between. It's going to be a bit of both. So I think there is clearly value for somebody in continuing to make our XL versions of the Enterprises and Voyager available.
Yeah.
The best thing we ever did is that TOS XL Enterprise. It's still my favorite model from all of them. And I think there's every chance that someone will come in and say, this is the best model of this has ever been available. Of course, we'll carry on making it. There are always going to be people who will want to buy an Enterprise.
Yeah.
I know that it's important to CBS that anybody who comes and takes on the license expresses an interest in doing the new shows, not necessarily every single ship.
Yeah.
But, if there's, a new Starfleet Academy TV show and it has a ship, and they are going to be like, look, if you want this license, we need you to commit to doing that. When it comes to the really deep dive stuff, I think it might be that we have to develop some kind of system where people not put money down. I don't want anyone to be in a position of ever having to put money down.
Yeah.
But show some kind of commitment.
Yeah.
To those kind of models. That, for a new player to have the confidence in doing those is quite an ask. But if we've got, however many thousand people it is who said, I would really like a model of Andrew Probert's vertical Romulan Warbird, then that might make it happen. So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking, is that there might, it will be a reduced program, but we have done 400 ships. So that was inevitable. That was kind of where the program was getting to anyway.
Yeah. Well, and you successfully trialed that with the USS Titan, right? Like, that was a petition that somebody said, there was enough signatures on the petition. You said, if you hit this point, we'll make it. And it hit the point, you made it, and it sold.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then it gave us confidence to do other things, but we did without going back to that, prove you want it, show you want it kind of thing. Yeah. So, I'm not talking about crowdfunding here. I'm just talking about some kind of expression of interest. I don't know. There are all sorts of ways that someone might be able to do it. But I think, any new person who's asked to put money up into this, and it is, it's real money. It's not just small kind of money that you could rustle up between your friends.
Right.
will want to have some kind of reason to believe that this is going to do okay. And on the more obscure stuff, we might have to think of ways of demonstrating that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that other licensee, Tomy, just did a crowdfunding for their larger enterprise build. And I think they've also announced some smaller ships, Alex, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, some diecast scale stuff.
Do you find, and this is not to comment on Tomy in any way, but do you find a crowdfunding type model as something worth pursuing? I know you mentioned it, not your initial thoughts in that regard, but
it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one from the licensor's point of view. One of the things about crowdfunding you hear just generally from licensors is that they don't like it because you've got the possibility of putting something out as an idea that then fails, and that reflects badly on the brand. So if you had I'm trying to think of a non-Star Trek example, if you
HasLab's like Star Wars Black Series, they've done two in a row and they both failed.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. So then you start saying, actually, maybe there isn't a market for this, and the licensor feels uncomfortable because it doesn't reflect well on their brand. I mean, it's not like anyone's going to go and look at it and go, "Well, Star Wars isn't popular anymore."
Yeah, right.
Who wants Star Wars stuff? But it is a concern for licensors that they don't want to be constantly promoting things that don't get there. That said, there are things that are more niche and obscure where I think crowdfunding is appropriate. So I'm going to give you an example that I might still be able to make this happen. So one of the things I discovered is that Sid Dutton still had pretty much all of his Star Trek matte paintings.
Yeah. He just sold them all last year, right?
Just sold them, yeah. So they photographed
one of the small concept paintings.
Yeah. So they photographed everything before they sold it, and so the idea of doing a book of Sid Dutton matte paintings, that was really expensive. You might say, look, in order to do this properly, it needs to be like a major, really weird format book with sort of CinemaScope proportions, and it needs to be expensive, and we know it's going to be very, very niche. That seems to me to be appropriate for crowdfunding, because you could be like, look, it's a limited edition of 1,000 copies or whatever.
I'd buy one.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I would, I'm very keen on that idea, and it was one of those things that unfortunately kind of got put to the side. But that as a concept that to me is appropriate for crowdfunding. When you're talking about something that is really extreme, if you're going to do something that is studio scale or something like that, something that is a real collector product. But what I don't think people should do is use it as a substitute for normal business.
Yeah.
It's I think you need to. There are halfway houses. There are ways in between, I think, and you can gauge people's interest without getting into the whole crowdfunding thing.
Yeah. Well, obviously, everybody's sort of dwelling a little bit on the sadness about the fate of models number 400 to 500, but we also shouldn't forget that there are 400 previous models over a decade's worth of when this line started in 2012 or whatever, when it launched, I don't think anybody conceived that it would go to the depths that it had got to. So I just want to kind of dwell for a couple of minutes on your experiences over the last 10 years of doing all of this stuff, with the hope that there's another 10 years in this for you still to come. But you mentioned your favorite, right? The TOS XL. Any other particular favorite models where you're like, on the Ben Robinson Hall of Fame shelf, that one sits alongside the TOS XL?
There are things that are just really satisfying. So like the Reliant, I just felt always lent itself to being made as a model. It just, it's just one of those things. You're just looking, oh, that looks good. That looks right. It wasn't particularly painfully difficult or anything like that. And Gary Kerr has a huge amount of credit for that TOS Enterprise, because it's things like the color being just, and that's down to Gary with the amount of research he's done into the original model. I was also really pleased. We tried something. So, I'm sure I've said all of this before. One of the ones I was really pleased with was the Jem'Hadar bug, the fighter, because the way they did that is anyone who's ever seen any pictures of the original studio model, it's very colourful, very dark, very definite colours. But when you saw it on screen, it's kind of silvery.
Yeah.
And they did that because it was to do with the way they composited it, and it was, all sorts of technical reasons for doing it that way. So working out what color it actually was really difficult.
Yeah.
But we did this kind of slightly metallic, because it gives the impression of having that metallic finish in the composited shot, but still with those colors in it, and it just worked out really, really well. So that's something I was really pleased with. I think the Pike Prize is really satisfying. I think it's a beautiful piece of design. I think they really did deliver a modern enterprise. A modern take on the classic design. It's like choose between your children, as if I had like Genghis Khan with 397 children.
From all the obscure ships, is there one that you're really proud that I can't believe they let me make this ship, from the really deep dives back in the corner of someone's mind?
I remember when we sending to CBS the Nausicaan ship, and they were like, "What is this?" That was fairly early on. I remember also, it's not so much that it was like, amazing that we got to do this. That is true so often. Actually, on Doctor Who figurine collection, I have that where I'm like, we got to do a monoid. So lots of Americans will have no idea lots of British people have no idea what a monoid or a monoid or a croton or a quark, But for Star Trek, it was more, I think what's really satisfying is the completeness of it. It's being able to sort of go, we did every Starfleet ship, right up to the original designs for the Excelsior. So that to me is its kind of real crowning achievement, is not that we did yet another version of the Mondor or whatever, but that we did every base ship and every Starfleet ship. That's pretty incredible. And I don't think when we started anybody would have thought that would have happened.
Yeah.
Even the most optimistic diehard person would never have imagined that's where we'd end up.
Do you have a white whale? Is there one that you've always wanted to do that you've just never had the opportunity to do yet?
There were a couple that were just technically impossible. So we always sort of talk about those. And stupidly, I can't think of the name of the ship, Nero ship from
the Narada.
The Narada. The Narada was just technically impossible for us to make something that we could ship to people.
I know you've expressed the challenges in the Xindi super weapon as well, that giant sphere.
Yeah, we looked at that. That was, to do it properly would have been horrendously expensive. Where, because you need that sort of gap between the different layers and all of that kind of stuff. I always had this kind of crazy idea about how to do a Borg cube, which was actually hollow so that you could see through it. There are certain things. The Borg cube is very challenging from a die-cast perspective. It's like, because it's a solid lump, and it meant you were sticking as much metal in it as possible, and that made it really, really expensive and slightly unsatisfying because you didn't have that kind of multi-planar thing going on within it. The things, I really regret that, John Eves never quite found the time to finish off the Emmett Till for us.
Yeah.
But I don't regret the fact that John's been so busy that he hasn't been able to. We were working with Andy Probert on the vertical Romulan Warbird, and, he'd been going back and forth with Fabio on that for a very long time. and it looks really nice to me. It looks finished, but Andy's still got a few tweaks he wanted to make. So those are the kind of almost but not quite.
Yeah.
But there's still hope.
So you're still feeling you're still enthusiastic. You're still in this, right? I mean, this is one chapter's closing, but you're ready for the next Star Trek chapter for Ben Robinson to open.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think Star Trek's in a really good place at the moment. I have yet to meet someone who told me they really didn't like Strange New Worlds. I think it's core Trek. It's of a kind I don't think we've actually seen since 1968. I think even the third season of the original series didn't quite deliver, core Trek in the way that Strange New Worlds has. Still waiting, I think it still needs its City on the Edge of Forever kind of episode. It still needs that like Inner Light or Yesterday's Enterprise kind of episode that leaves you floored. But yeah, I think Star Trek's in a really good place. I think there's still plenty of stuff to do. I'm enjoying it every bit as much as I have done at any point in the last 25 years, being lucky enough to work on it. So yeah, I feel, and I feel optimistic about the possibilities of finding people who will be willing to invest in this. We're just going to need to be able to demonstrate, that the fandom is there and that there are people who want these things.
And also give time, right? And if there's one thing that Star Trek fans are not, it's patience. But patience.
Oh, I don't know. We waited. We went from 1969 to 1979, getting by on a few animated episodes. We went, we had movies in the 80s. But I mean, I think Star Trek fans are a bit more patient than maybe people give them credit for. We all look at the negative. I mean, I have been overwhelmed by the kindness and the positivity of the responses to my coming back on Twitter. As I mean, it's difficult to put into words how much that means and how emotional it is to see that kind of reach. I mean, I've got 5,000 or 6,000 followers, and that first tweet's been seen by 125,000 people or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
it goes to show how hungry people are for news about what's going on, and obviously you've been appropriately, quiet about things up until now, and we really appreciate that you are able to come help and help share things in your own words about as much as you're able to for those fans.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm very sorry that there hasn't been better communication. It wasn't my choice. And I mean, I'm afraid that all of us who are working at Eaglemoss were told that we could not communicate with people. So while I was on the staff, I had no choice. So as soon as I was made redundant, I literally was like, I've been made redundant. Right, fine. Now I can say something. It's so frustrating seeing all those people who are, are understandably stressing and feeling depressed and, worried about how much they'd invested in something and not having any hope. And as I say, I can't make any promises, but I can promise you that I will do my best to make something happen. Whether my best will be enough is not, I can't, but I will certainly try. And I can promise you that CBS, Viacom, Paramount, whatever they now want to call themselves, are also, determined to find a good outcome for this. Yeah. They were completely blindsided by this. They knew no more than any of you. And that was frustrating to me as well. I wasn't allowed to talk to them about it. And they have been really supportive, and they are determined to do everything they can to help people, particularly the bill that must be the first priority. But they also, they've been big supporters of this program, and they continue to be so.
Well, thank you, Ben. I mean, thank you for 10 years of such, thank you for 30 years of all your work on Star Trek, but 10 years on the Star Trek collection, particularly as somebody who probably owns 395 of the 400 ships. It's been a huge part of my fandom over the last decade. And I am hopeful and looking forward to the next chapter and what comes next. And if there's anything, of course, that, any of us in the Star Trek fandom can do to kind of help support that next chapter, we're, as I think you can tell from the response to the demise of Eaglemoss, we are ready, willing, and able to assist in any way we can.
I may well take you up on that. I need to work out what we can do.
Yeah.
And obviously there are lots of things with GDPR, but whether we can set up some kind of subscription newsletter or something, we can get, demonstrate enough people are interested in things. And have the right to communicate with people, because GDPR is a good thing. None of us want to be spammed. Yeah. But what it also does is means that I can't just email everybody who is a subscriber.
Yeah.
There are restrictions on that. So getting the word out there and getting everybody to sort of come together so that we could show a potential new investor that this is a worthwhile thing and that there's a real market still there. Because lots of people would look at it, I think, and say, well, you've done 400 chips. There's, what is there left to do? So we might have to try and do a little something to prove that there's still some enthusiasm. The other thing I guess we didn't talk about is just I think I can't remember what I've said to who, the stock that's stuck in the system will get released, I think, before the end of the year. So people will have a chance to buy missing things and some things that were announced but not released.
Perfect.
And I would,
that stuff I imagine you would imagine through third-party retailers at this point.
Yes,
right?
yes. So basically what happened is Eaglemoss had a load of stuff in their warehouses. Some of it was in like part work packaging and all of that, and it's maybe a little dusty, but it's in a bag, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. But that stuff is being picked up by third parties, so will be available. So I know a lot of people I've seen were like, oh, I was just gonna get that and I couldn't. That's like just again, it'll take a couple of months to resolve itself, maybe a little longer, but there are reasons to be hopeful. There you will still be able to pick up pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Great.
Somewhere.
Yeah, and as that information becomes something that is able to be shared, please reach. We're here and we're ready to blast it out to folks when the time comes, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah.
And likewise with the books, I'm still very optimistic that we will find people to take them on. It may not be one single publisher for everything.
Yeah.
But the book we've been doing with Nana the
Women of Trek.
Because I know that's such a big one. I'm sure that one will find a home somewhere. That's got so much
me too.
Desire behind it.
Me too, I think, and we've done incredible interviews, really eye-opening stuff, and Nana's great. So I really have a lot of faith in that project, and that is very important to me. It's close to my heart, that one, and I'm that I will, if I have to publish myself,
Believe it.